question is asked. Fine, we understand that there is horrible things that happened, but what is the fault now that you're attacking back? Now that the Jewish people are attacking back to at least a certain extent, they reported maybe 6,000 bombs thrown on the Gaza over there. I'm surprised it's only 6,000. It should have simply been just one. But the point is that people are asking, fine, they did bad things. There's thousands of terrorists that infiltrated the country, beat the system, destroyed the morale of countless people. What is the fault of the civilians? And especially the babies, the children that are being killed by some of these bombs, that are being killed by some of these bullets. Says David HaMelech, David HaMelech tells us in Psalms, chapter 137, verse 9, David HaMelech tells us the rules of war. Ashrei yeshalem lach et gmulech shegamalt lanu, Ashrei sheyochaz v'nipetz et olalaych el sela. O violated daughter of Babylon, praiseworthy is he who repays you in accordance with the manner that you treated us. Praiseworthy is he who will clutch and dash your infants against the rock. Says David HaMelech, the tormentors of the Jewish people, the torturers of the Jewish people, not just the Babylonians, not just the Assyrians, not just the Spaniards or the Nazis, but especially so in the last generation, the Ishmaelim. We will have our day where we will praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu when He takes the infants and smashes their heads against the rocks, as they did to us. Meaning that David HaMelech, Beruach HaKodsho, told us that during war there is no mercy. When you are fighting an enemy, there is no mercy. As the rule of the Torah is, Kol hamerachem al ha'achzarim sofo litachzer al rachmanim. Anyone who is merciful over vicious people ultimately will become vicious towards merciful people. There is no permission from the Torah to have any mercy whatsoever during war. Not on children, not on women, not on anybody. Why? Because if a person understands what is war and why you're fighting, you'll understand that by being merciful on the vicious, you will eventually become vicious on the merciful. But how does that work? One of the stories that was publicized and then republicized recently that shows this proof of the Torah's divinity come to life in a horrific way is that some time ago there was a video that was publicized of Jewish soldiers flying in the middle of a special mission, and you hear the guy the pilot telling the base that he has a target, but then he identified that it was a group of children, 3-4 children. Should I shoot them? Should I not? He says. He doesn't get the answer, and then shortly later, you see him fly away, and he says, I let them go. I didn't do anything. And this was publicized and celebrated of how humane the Israeli army is. Wow! Now if the story would have ended there, then we wouldn't have even mentioned it. Unfortunately, what ended up happening is that those 3 children, those 3 Ishmaelim, grew up and got the Ishmaeli education. The Ishmaeli education that tells you that murdering and raping Jewish people is what you're supposed to aim for. That's their ideology. And those Ishmaeli kids grew up to become adults that were terrorists. Terrorists that ended up raping and killing Jewish men and women. They are the ones that showed up. They showed up during this attack. This is the reason, Rabotai Karim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says during war, there is no mercy. You may think you're being merciful to a child, but you're not being merciful to the child. You're being vicious to the ultimate victim that this child will grow up and kill. Because the ideology that child will grow up with is even worse than the ideology of his father. Hence the reason why the Torah in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 20, verse 16, says, rules of war, Lo techaye kol neshama, do not allow anyone to remain alive. Nothing. No mercy. Furthermore, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 25, verse 19, Macho et zecher Amalek, completely erase any memory of Amalek, which means men, women, and children, the Torah says, do not have the right to exist once we're at war. And the reality is that people think, well, it's only a baby. To you, it's only a baby. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the before, the during, and the after, the past, present, and the future. Gave us a holy Torah that takes everything into consideration. And says that if you do not follow my Torah precisely, you will eventually suffer. There was a Rav Kahana that mentioned these words of the Torah years ago, and people called him a fanatic because he's following the Torah that's older than any law book out there in the world. They called him a fanatic, but today they realize that he was right. More than ever, they realize that he was right. The reality is, Rabotai, that these terrorists weren't born today. They have been groomed for decades. And the world not only remained silent, but actually supported them. Now, the Zohar Kadosh says, why is Ishmael called Ishmael? Answer is because at the end of days, Ishmael will cause so much torment and suffering to Am Yisrael, to the point where Am Yisrael will cry out to Hashem until Ishmael, until Hashem hears us, hears our cries, and answers us. Many people in Israel are crying over what happened, and I don't think you're going to find one normal human being that has an ounce of happiness in him right now about what's transpired over the last few days. But certainly there are people with all types of opinions. Hence the reason why we don't want to go to people's opinions. We only want to go to the Holy Torah, because the Torah is the opinion of God. What does God say about all of this? What does God have to say about all of this? The book of Jeremiah and Isaiah are full of different verses that respond to this particular situation. In fact, some of the secrets that you will find in the Torah is if you go to the chapters that are in the same date as this event. Chapter in Tehillim, Kaf chapter in Jeremiah, several other places, you'll see the verses, the paragraphs over there discuss this event as if it was the instructions of how to deal with this once it happens. The prophet Jeremiah in chapter 30 tells us about what just happened. And in fact, what will continue happening until we cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with hearts that have done Teshuva, with hearts that have been circumcised, with hearts that have realized that we've made a mistake by not following His Torah completely. And Jeremiah says in the name of God, thus says Hashem, God of Israel, saying, write down for yourself all of these things that I am telling you into a book. Why should Jeremiah write this into a book? Because obviously Hashem is telling him this prophecy is not just for the times that you're living where the Bet HaMikdash is being destroyed and Am Yisrael was being punished. But rather this is going to be an ongoing prophecy that will materialize at the end of days. The war of Gog and Magog. For behold, the days are coming, says Hashem, when I will return the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, said Hashem, and I will return them to the land that I gave their forefathers, and they will possess it. Here we see the prophet Jeremiah is already telling us that one day Hashem is going to give us back the land. And these are the things that Hashem spoke concerning Israel, concerning Judah. For thus said Hashem, sound of terror have we heard, of fear, and not of peace. Ask now and see if a male has ever given birth. Why then do I see that every man puts his hands upon his loins like a woman in childbirth, and all the faces turn pale? Here, Jeremiah is telling us that the prophecy that he's seeing is an extraordinary sorrow and sadness, like you will see on most normal Jewish faces today. Faces that many of those people never made, even when they had a death in their own family, because of the gruesome details of all the murders. Woe for that day will be momentous. There is nothing like it. It will be a time of trouble for Yaakov. Here, the prophet Jeremiah is telling us that this time, this Gog and Magog, this troubles before it, during it, is not going to be like anything else. And that's saying a lot. The Jewish people have been tormented and tortured by every major nation since the beginning of time. Whether it's the Babylonians or the Assyrians, the Greeks and the Romans, the Spaniards, the British, and certainly even their own people, aside from the Germans. But here the prophet says that at the end of days, the trouble will be unlike any other. Eventually you'll be saved, promises Hashem. Eventually you'll be saved. But that's not going to be such a simple thing. That's just going to happen just because a few people give charity. Just because a few people do a good deed. It shall be on that day, the word of Hashem, Master of Legions, that I will break off the yoke from your neck, and I will tear your straps, and foreigners will no longer enslave him. Meaning the salvation will ultimately come. They will serve Hashem their God and David their king, whom I will establish over them. But as for you, do not fear, my servant Yaakov, the word of Hashem, and do not be afraid, Israel, for behold, I am saving you from distant places, and your descendants from the land of their captivity. And Yaakov will return and be at peace and tranquil. Here, Kadosh Baruch Hu tells us that this time of a nightmare that the Jewish people will experience from the agony that's unlike any other will also include captives, prisoners. Just like we have right now, where nearly between 150 and 200 Jewish people have reported to be captured, as kidnapped, and are being tortured, raped, and in many cases murdered. They brought some of them over there just to kill them in the streets, like pure animals. Where when you feed, you want to make a scene with animals. You want a bunch of lions, a bunch of alligators. You want an audience to watch. You don't feed them for a little while and then you throw an animal, throw a living animal, dead animal, something bloody in the middle, and you see all the animals fight over it. Everyone wants everything. That's the Ishmaelim. They brought some of the Jewish people back to their terrorist headquarters in Gaza over there and other places. And literally you see the civilians that everyone keeps crying about and trying to defend. You see the civilians acting even more viciously than the vicious people that brought them. Where they're literally all trying to get a punch, a hit, trying to kill the people, so much so that they actually end up hating even their own people, the people, the terrorists themselves, they're hating them also. Just to try to kill them. Then they take Jewish children, videotape him as he gets beat up by other Palestinian kids, little terrorists being trained to kill. Make a video out of it. They think it's funny. They publicize it everywhere. Some people have publicized that child's picture next to a picture of a Jewish child from the Holocaust. And the resemblance is astounding. Literally like a reincarnation. The horrors were literally endless for those that are still alive there. Those that are still alive. But of course people are going to defend them and say, no, you're making it up. Go check. Go online and check. Go call your Ishmaeli brothers, fellow terrorists. Ask him to send you a few pictures. Ask him to send you a few videos of how many people they murdered today, how many people they raped today. Go see what they do. Go see how they celebrate. Tormenting people. Mutilating bodies in the most unusual ways. And laughing the whole time. But on TV, they make sure to cry. They make sure to cry for the TV. Like movie stars from Hollywood. Oh, poor me, my house blew up. Should be calling it my terror cell. But that's what's happening. This tormenting is already prophesied, and Jeremiah says there's going to be captives. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells us there's going to be captives, there's going to be tormenting, but he also promises us that despite all of our violations of the Torah and our lack of loyalty to Hashem, he will chastise us with justice, but I will never eliminate you completely, he says. This is all in chapter 30 of the book of Jeremiah. Furthermore, the prophet Isaiah, that the Chachamim say was the greatest prophet aside from Moshe Rabbeinu. In chapter 42, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, starting in verse number 5, which is this week's Parshat Bereshit, this is the Haftarah. And verse number 5 is where the Haftarah starts. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us about His greatness. Thus says Hashem, who created the heavens and stretched them forth, who formed the earth and its produce, who gave soul to the people upon it, and spirit to those who walk on it. I am Hashem. I have called you with righteousness. I will strengthen your hand. I will protect you. I will set you for a covenant to the people, for a light to the nations, to open blind eyes, to remove a prisoner from the confinement, dwellers in darkness and from a dungeon. I am Hashem. This is my name. I shall not give my glory to another, nor my praise to graven idols. So here HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues on and on to express His greatness. But then He tells us that despite His greatness, despite His mercy, despite His generosity, there's going to be people that don't listen. And He says, "O deaf ones, listen." This is verse 18. "O deaf ones, listen." How could a deaf listen? Meaning they're deaf by choice. They don't want to listen to the Torah. "And blind ones, gaze to see." How come the blind, He's asking them to see? Because they're not really blind. They just choose not to watch the Shiur Torah. They rather watch soccer. They rather watch all types of nonsense. "Who is blind but my servant, and deaf as my messenger whom I send? Who is blind like the perfected man, blind like the servant of Hashem?" Here He's telling us that because we chose to be blind, despite His greatness, bad things will happen. And He says in verse 22, "But it is looted, downtrodden people, all of them trapped in holes and hidden away in prisons. They are looted and there is no rescuer, plundered with none to say, give it back." Here HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us as a result of us not following His Torah, He's going to start allowing the enemies to do their will. Not to annihilate us, but certainly to hurt us, certainly to kill some of us. And get to a point where we will become downtrodden people that are trapped, and no one will care about what we say. The Gemara in Maseret Ketubot, page 111a, shows a promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made. A promise that's a scary promise. A promise that every Jew will be able to relate to at this time, if his eyes have been opened. Where the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to His people, if you fulfill the oath that you made, which means to follow my Torah, good. But if not, I will allow the nations to rip your skin apart like they do for the deer. This is literally a part of our Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling us, I love you. I won't destroy you, but I will rebuke you if you don't fulfill the oath. What is the rebuke? The massacre that just happened. The massacres that have happened. And it'll only get worse if we do not do tshuva. Now on the good side, Rabotai, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised us that He will not destroy us, because there's always going to be some that are loyal to Him, they're going to fight for His honor, and will ultimately get their reward. What is the reward? We know it's a salvation, but what's the salvation look like? Each day a Jew prays and reads about the salvation. Part of it is mentioned by David HaMelech in Psalm chapter 94. The whole psalm is discussing a critical part of the salvation that the righteous Jewish people will get at the end of days, after being tormented, after being tortured, after being captured, after being used for all types of horrific things throughout the medical experiments these psychopaths have, these tormented, disgusting, vile brains that they have. For all of the years they've done it. Part of the salvation that the Jewish people will get is written in Psalm number 94. El nekamot Adonai, el nekamot Ophia. O God of vengeance, Hashem, O God of vengeance, appear. The day will come where Kadosh Baruch Hu will come and take revenge against all of the enemies of the Jewish people, the ones that have stayed loyal to Him, the ones that have done Teshuva, the ones that have fixed their mistakes to the best of their ability, and observed Shabbat, and observed Kashrut, and observed all of the laws they knew about to the best of their abilities, without making excuses, but yet have been tormented by all types of people, both Jews and Gentiles. Says David HaMelech, the day will come where the God of vengeance, He will come. And Hashem ilachem lachem v'atem techarishun. God will fight your wars and you shall remain silent. And says David HaMelech, arise, O judge of the earth. Render recompense to the haughty. Until when will the wicked, O Hashem, until when will the wicked exult? They speak freely. They utter malicious falsehood. They glorify themselves, all doers of iniquity. Your nation, Hashem, they crush, and they afflicted your heritage. The widow and the stranger they slay, and the orphans they murder. And they say, God will not see, nor will the God of Yaakov understand. Understand, you boors among the people, and you fools, when you will gain wisdom. He who implants the ear, will he not hear? Will he who fashions the eye not see? He who chastises the nation, will he not rebuke? It is He who teaches man knowledge. Hashem knows the thoughts of man, that they are futile. Here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us clear instructions of what's going to happen. Well, initially, after we make many, many mistakes, but we do Teshuva, we fix ourselves. The time will come where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says salvation. But part of that salvation would be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come and fight the war of vengeance for His people, against all of the people that lied about them, all the media, all the terrorists making comments on the internet and writing all types of fake articles. All of those people, Hashem will take vengeance against them. All of those people that glorify themselves after hurting the Jewish people, like they're doing right now, Hashem will take revenge against them. But these boors, these ignoramuses, they claim to believe in God. David HaMelech says, yeah, believe or no believe, the reality is their actions speak louder than the words. They may believe in God, but they perhaps think that God doesn't see their evil, doesn't hear about their evil, doesn't know about their evil. He says to them, is it possible that the one that created vision will not see? The one that gave you the ability to hear, he himself can't hear. You're trying to fool the world to think that you are religious Muslims, you are religious, and you're loyal to God after murdering his children. This is what you think. And even if you didn't murder, you supported them, you're defending them. Praiseworthy is the man, says David HaMelech. Praiseworthy is the man whom God disciplines, and whom you teach from your Torah, to give him rest from the days of evil, while a pit is dug for the wicked. He says, salvation will come. And of course, the salvation is going to come for all those people that used to be evil, used to be bad themselves, but they did Teshuva. He's praiseworthy because he did Teshuva. As the Rambam writes in Ilchot Teshuva, before he did Teshuva, he was disgusting, hated, an enemy of God. But now that he did Teshuva, Hashem loves him. He's his dear friend. He's beautiful. So those that had bad acts but have done Teshuva and received the discipline, good, they're praiseworthy. But those that remain wicked, there's nothing worse than them. For Hashem will not cast off his people, nor will he forsake his heritage. For justice shall revert to righteous, and following it will be all the upright heart. Here David HaMelech continues to tell us that part of the salvation is to see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu not only protects those that have done Teshuva, but he also gives them the pleasure of seeing their tormentors, their enemies, destroyed in the most massive way known to man, beyond anyone's comprehension. The amount of suffering that they will have is literally endless. And the Yalkut Shimoni says that really this entire Tehillim, number 94, was a prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. This is what he wrote, that he saw the end of days at Mount Sinai when Hashem showed it to him. He saw the end of days. He was shown the end. He was shown how his descendants, how his people are tormented by Ishmael. And he cried. He cried to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is happening to them. He knew it was justice. Hashem showed him that part of that salvation that will eventually happen is that Hashem himself will take vengeance against all of those enemies. So Moshe Rabbeinu said it, and David HaMelech wrote it down. This, Rabotai, is what's happening right now. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot says 3 things that Hashem gifts to people are only gifted to them through suffering. Torah knowledge, Olam Haba, and living in Israel. Meaning you cannot actually have any one of those 3 without suffering being the price. To become a Torah scholar requires an enormous amount of sacrifice. To eventually be righteous enough where a person is going to go to Olam Haba, enormous amount of sacrifice. But now we're seeing all of the people here that are living in Israel see the struggle they have to live with on a day-to-day basis, where your enemies literally in the same building. One person that we know had to evacuate her building. Why? Where she lived, the entire building, all the tenants in the building, aside from her, were all Hamas, all terrorists, all Palestinian haters of Jews. And to save herself and our kids, she had to literally run away from there. You ask, why would she live next to that? There's also other Jewish people that live in other buildings, just not that one. 50 families evacuated their place that's literally surrounded by Arabs and came here to around the corner, here in Yerushalayim. Why? They're surrounded by the enemy. And they don't have the protection yet that David HaMelech mentions. They're scared. So while the world will try to convince all of you that the response of the Israeli army is much more than what's happened, now you know the truth. No nation on planet Earth has committed as many crimes, and even in a war, as what these vicious monsters have done in the last couple of days. Mutilating bodies, publicizing it, laughing about it. And if it was just the soldiers of some army, but you're not talking about just soldiers. You're talking about the civilians. You're talking about all of the people that are part of it. And it's not just here. It's all of the people that are part of it all over the world. All of these supporters of the Free Palestine nonsense and the anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish mentality and ideology, all of them support this vicious acts. And each and every single one of them will eventually see the promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us in Psalm number 94. The God of vengeance is here.
I've heard enough. New arrival screams echoing through the hallway to know that this ain't good. Once they pass them through the infierno, they don't come back. It's enough to make you go crazy.
Do not think we fear you, Spirit. We know your power is born of evil. This is your last night in the land of the living. You understand me, malevolent demon?
There was a rich family that lived here called the Hetheringtons, and unfortunately, their daughter passed away of a heart attack inside the house. Basically, they were so devastated that they reached out to people claiming to be psychic mediums. They actually weren't psychic mediums. They opened up a total of 11 portals inside this house and invited spirits and entities from all different kinds of dimensions.
Well, I think there are certain pieces of evidence that there is an afterlife.
Resurrection of the dead is affirmed pretty clearly in the Talmud and the Midrash.
To be honest with you, to give this lecture is a nightmare. If it was up to me, I wouldn't. There's going to be some graphic details.
This place is a maze.
That person after death went to a place called Sheol.
This is by far the largest near-death experience study that has ever been conducted.
People go to a place and they experience weird things. And sometimes they actually will see a character of some type. Well, where did that come from?
I don't know why that one chain is swinging back there.
They may describe feeling profoundly peaceful, seeing a bright, warm, welcoming light. Some people describe watching doctors and nurses working on them with incredible accuracy.
Next thing I knew, I was above my body watching the operation.
How long did you feel like you were gone?
I went to a place of timelessness. And so what that means, it could have been a second, could have been 5 minutes. I don't know.
Can you imagine waking up from your sleep and not being able to move?
As I'm lying there, I realized that there's an evil presence next to me.
Do you believe that angels, demons exist?
Holy shit, dude, get out of here! Oh my god, dude!
Strange things keep happening, bizarre nightmares, as if I'm on fire.
Whoa, what the hell is this? Man, I've got bad chest pain.
Satan's Hollow is what it's called, the portal to hell.
Some people calling it an eye of fire, while others said it looked like the portal to hell opening up.
And the next thing I know, I was outside of my body, looking at my body.
What I'm going to do is called claromancy, the art of throwing lots or throwing bones.
2,000 years of experience, passed down, recorded, of how demons work.
God has them all on a leash, and he lets the leash go enough to let them tempt us, because that's what makes us spiritually stronger.
I'm trying to be as graphic as possible so you understand what we're talking about.
It's your ticket to reality. It's your ticket to freedom. It's your ticket to immortality.
Is there an afterlife? Is there a
It's
God?
the type of information that can keep you away from the Yetzirah.
What happens to us after we die?